Now, we are going to talk about how to integrate a DynamoDB application to our system to complete our ongoing project, right? So, what we are going to do is to start by creating a DynamoDB table. So, I'll just simply search for DynamoDB. So, if you are new to AWS, a DynamoDB table is pretty much a NoSQL database that is fully managed by AWS. So, you just come in to create your tables and then you make use of it. So, I'm going to create a table and then I'll call my table serverless notes. So, what you are going to do is this table is going to proceed to store our notes, and then that will be tied to a specific user, right? So before the user sees their notes in the system, they'll have to go through the authentication process. They have to log in and all. So if you are new to this tutorial and then you just want to see this part of where you compare DynamoDB tables against Lambda, this is fine. But for those of us that are watching this as part of the series, this is the next step that we are going to build. That is the last part of the series where we are adding our nodes to our DB table. So yeah, I'm going to call my partition key user ID and then my sort key as note ID. So partition key and sort key, pretty much think of it like this. So you see your user key, your user ID as say a folder, and then your note ID as a file inside it. So DynamoDB uses the folder to find the right physical location first, and then by using your file, that's the file name, you're able to get the exact record. Right, so partition key is kind of helping us to do the grouping, and then sort key to identify that particular object, pretty much like that. So I'm just going to select this, customize, leave it as on demand, and then just create my table. This should be fine. Good. The next thing is we are going to modify our Lambda function. That's the serverless API Lambda function we've been working with. What we are going to do is to modify the Lambda function logic so that it's able to write into a DB table. So the new update I'm doing with today's Lambda is so this Lambda function is pretty much a very simple code where we are kinda performing some CRUD stuff on the Lambda function. So we are going to update, add nodes, do all that. So if you go through it, the Lambda function is doing pretty much that. The key components are just the initial bits, that's where we are doing the authentication using our Cognito, and then the following are the various paths, right, that we are going to configure surely in API gateway, and then the rest are the various methods that we're working with. Say create nodes, get all nodes, and then if need to update the nodes. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. The rest is just we handling core stuff. So I'm just going to deploy this Lambda for now. If you are watching this video afresh, this is just a Lambda function that is kind of being fronted by an API gateway that gets invoked. We've been using this thing as part of our tutorial series. Yeah, so if you want to check it out, do feel free to look at the initial bit of the project, and then that will be good to go. Now the next thing is to go to API gateway to add our new node resources, right? So inside API gateway, we have a simple API that we've been working with, and then we currently have auth, a resource for auth, that's for authentication, and then the initial hello stuff we were using for first in the part 1. This came in part 2. So now I'm just going to add a new resource for the nodes, the same way we've been doing it all this while. Just come in, I'll create my resource, and then now under my node resource I'm going to create a method that's for post. That is when you want to create, right, Again, I'm going to enable my Lambda proxy integration, and for this I'm going to select my serverless API handler, the Lambda function we updated. Yes, one last thing. For our method request, we are going to select our Cognito authorizer that we initially worked on. So I'm going to create that method. Then I will then proceed to enable. Let me enable course for this method. I think I didn't do that. Sorry for this resource. Let me enable course. Then I'm going to proceed to add a new method for get. So to get all our notes from the DB table we created, again pointing the same serverless handler, I'll select the same Cognito authorizer, then I'll create it. Now I'm going to create another resource under the notes to be able to get a specific note detail. So I'm just going to click on my notes and then click on create resources. Then I'll paste this thing in there. And I'll create it. Now under this slash notes, what I'm going to do is to add my various methods. So this allows me to perform certain actions on the individual nodes, right, from the DB table. That's why I have that curly bracket around that. So I'm able to pass certain details as a parameter through it. Now, kindly don't forget your authorizer or authorization. The next one is put to update it to enable Lambda proxy integration. The same backend. Then now the last one is going to be able to delete it. So let me add a delete method. Enable, select this, again same authorizer from authorization, then create. And ensure I enable course. Yeah, so this is pretty much it. What I'm going to do now is to deploy my API gateway. So as part of the video, I've been mentioning always that once you make any changes to API gateway, if you want to see it, you have to deploy it. So now API is ready. So what I can proceed to do is to access my web application, and then this is it. So we have this, that's our serverless code. I'll do well to share this with you. Don't worry so much about this. This is heavily AI generated. You can play with it and then generate your own web application to work with. But this is what we currently have. So we have just a simple notes app that requires us to authenticate first, then you'll be able to see our available nodes. Right, so I'll just go in here to copy my base URL as always, just to get myself authenticated. So this is it. Then for my nodes API, I'm going /nodes. Yeah, so in an actual application, some of these things will all be in the actual code itself. You won't see them on the UI, just for our testing purposes. That's why I have this thing here. So let me simply log in. So yeah, I've logged in successfully. And then as you can see, if I want to enter nodes, this is testing. Hello world. Let me save my notes. Error. Assume row. Oh, this is a good one to catch. So our Lambda permission doesn't have the necessary policy to do a partition item into a DB table. So let me quickly fix that. So now to my serverless Lambda function, I'll basically come to configuration. One, let me just increase my timeouts to avoid all timeout issues to a minute. And then to fix the permission issue, I'll simply come to permissions, then open the row. So what I'm going to do is to create a simple inline policy. So I'll create an inline policy. The service that I'm looking at is DynamoDB, so I'll search for DynamoDB. Then the first error I'm getting is a put item. I think because I want to list it, I'm sure we will need a get item also. Then I'm very sure to update an item in a DB table, we need an update item, an update table. Then probably to be able to delete, I will need delete items. So yeah, so with the permissions and stuff, the more you work with, the more you play with AWS, you realize that you have all these things in here. So now let me add query to it. And then for resources, for this, I'm not going to specify the direct ARN, I'm just going to select all. Click on next. Then give my policy a name. Let me do serverless. Yeah, I can just give it any name you want. Then create my policy. So this is an inline policy. So hopefully, if I come to my UI again, then I try saving notes, this should work. So yeah, so as you can see, now our note has been added to our DynamoDB table. If I come to DynamoDB and then I refresh, explore items, you'll see our table item in here, right? For this user, you'll see it in here. So hello world, blah blah blah, it just comes in there, and then that is it. So this is just a simple test, right? So you can just keep on playing with this and then see how some of these things go. So you can just play with this, generate some fancy applications and do whatever you want to do. So this is how pretty much you build a serverless notes app, right? But the focus is not the serverless notes app. The focus is the things we learned along the journey. Now you know how to create an API gateway, a REST API. You know how to create Lambda functions, integrate your API with your Lambda function, proceed to add authentication to it through Cognito, and then you can then proceed to integrate with its a database like DynamoDB table and all. So now users are only able to access your notes, your applications through authentication. A lot of the apps you see around works pretty much on these various principles that you've seen. Thank you so much for watching, and then see you in the next project tutorial.